Hello and welcome to the Keystone Kickoff Show. I am Jim Galante along with T. Frank Carr. T. Frank, we finally have some football coming up. It's Blue-White Week.
Yes. Some intense scrimmaging on the way where fans are going to be like, I don't know what I watched. And I'll be like, I don't know yet either, but I'll find out when I watch it back. This is the one game a year that I get to go to and be live at the game. So you won't have a post-game show or instant analysis in the same way, but we'll get into it at some point.
I'm sure we will. You and I will do that. I look at it this way, T. Frank. It's the off season. It's been months since we had football. It'll be months till we again have real football. I'll take what I can get and be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got the Blue-White game coming up. So in the spirit of that, T. Frank, you put together a couple articles talking about the players that you were looking forward to seeing from this game.
Yeah.
Interesting list. Let's hit that. Now, we're going to do that in quarter one, quarter two, quarter three. Of course, we'll have Ask T. Frank. For quarter four, I'm going to usher you out of the studio, T. Frank, because we have a special guest for quarter four on the Keystone Kickoff Show. Let's get right to it. Let's get to your list on defense. You started with, I was a little surprised by this name. It's not one that sticks out when I'm thinking about the Blue-White game and who to look for, but we're talking about Dakari Nelson as one of the guys that you're interested in seeing.
It's just based on curiosity. Players on the roster where I don't know exactly where they fit, how they play, or how they're progressing. So Dakari Nelson is 6'3", 223 pounds. There has been an open speculation, not just if he's going to be the Lion position before Tom Allen was hired, but is he going to grow into a Sam linebacker or even a Will linebacker someday? Like, what's his body going to do over time? When we saw him in February, he said plan is still to play safety, but that safety position also includes some field linebacker responsibilities. And during the conversation this spring, Jalen Reed is the name at safety that's come up as the starter. And then there's been other players, A.J. Harris, and then Zion Tracy, Cam Miller, other corners as guys to play that nickel role. So you want to have different body types there. Is Nelson a part of that conversation? I made the comment when they were being recruited that I could also see King Mack playing that. Now, he's not a part of that conversation at this point. So is Nelson? Or is it really just Jalen Reed and then cornerbacks? So it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and he's just one guy that I think can do a couple of different things. And generally, I was really high on his physical talent. This is a big, fast, athletic football player, and I want to see where all of that has translated because we didn't see as much of him his freshman season, so I want to see how he's been developing and what the next wave at safety is going to be like, because from a talent perspective, and these can always kind of get overinflated because we talk a lot about this stuff in speculation terms without actually having the data and the evidence and the information of the team, right? So is Dakari Nelson still in the low 4.4s as an athlete, right? So that was kind of where he told me that he was running in the 4.4s as a high school corner, essentially is what he played in high school. So I want to know, like, what does he look like? How's he playing? Is he picking up the defense? And, kind of looking at the future of the Penn State defense, more so than wanting to know exactly how the starting pieces all fit together.
I would also think, T. Frank, just his body type, as big as he is, when you start saying, I want someone who could cover like a cornerback, have the skills of a safety, but also be able to handle some linebacker responsibilities, this is probably the body type you're looking for.
Yeah, this is exactly the body type. A big safety who's super athletic, who kind of rides that line between, is he a linebacker, is he a safety? And the best of those are not true tweeners. They are safeties. Like, if you're projecting to the NFL, they're safeties. But they have this physicality and aggressiveness and confidence to play the run like a linebacker. So does he fit into that? Does he fit into that, or is he a guy that's going to eventually have to add weight and play closer to the line of scrimmage? Is he a guy that can't handle playing, in the trash at the line of scrimmage, because like I said, in high school, he played a lot of corner. He didn't get to play a lot of safety. So his skills, from what I understand of him coming into college, are more coverage based instead of they are more physical, attacking, tackling. In fact, I think, again, you look at King Mack, he was the more physical of the two at 5'9", 175 pounds. That's no slight on Nelson. It's just what he was asked to do. One of them was a safety, and one of them had to do what he had to do for his team in high school, which was, be the number one corner and play some snaps at safety and kind of situationally.
Well, I don't think it's a bad thing if a guy playing the line position has the coverage skills of a cornerback.
Exactly,
Frank.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Next up on your list is Caleb Artis, and your question is he the defensive tackle of the future?
A defensive tackle of the future is how I should have worded that, right? So this defense has a lot of known variables. I would say even the cornerback competition, which is kind of why they're not on this list, spoiler alert, we know about them. We saw enough of Cam Miller over time. I saw enough of Zion Tracy that I feel like I have a good idea of his skill set. But Caleb Artis is very important because you expect at least 3 of Penn State's defensive tackles. I think they all have to move on after this year. So is Caleb Artis going to be a part of the conversation as the 5th defensive tackle, or is it going to be a 4-man rotation? Is he going to make a move to have playing time, or is he a guy that's going to be still like maybe in 2025? And then if, you don't want to put all these th'ings out in the universe because it's inappropriate to do so, but what's Penn State working with after this season at defensive tackle? He's a guy 6'3", 317. He's a big-bodied nose tackle that can move well and is very athletic in terms of good flexibility, good mobility, maybe not hyper-athletic, but like a really good prospect as a one-technique nose tackle in a 4-3 system. So I want to see what he can do. I want to see if he's gotten better since last year. And really, the only time we got to see him was in the blue-white game last year, which he was okay. He did fine, but he didn't stand out necessarily. So what does he look like this time around? And does that produce different results?
And T. Frank, it's interesting that you brought up his name. I have this thing about they have 97 players on scholarship, and they've got to get it down to 85. Not looking at specific names. I was looking at numbers at specific. It looks like just quantity. They have several defensive tackles, but to your point, several of them are going to move on. So maybe not in 24, but he could be an important piece in 25, and they could ill afford to lose that depth at defensive tackle that could play in the following season. All right. Next up, as you pointed out in your article, you cheated a bit on your list here of 5 guys by putting 2 guys in at once. We're going to allow it, T. Frank, because I understand why. But you have Tamir Robinson and Kavion Keys, both linebackers, and they are going to need more depth at linebacker. They lost a couple really good ones. One of them, Abdul Carter, with a position change. They need to have that next generation of linebackers, don't they?
Yeah, I don't think they need to have both, because Tamir Robinson at middle linebacker, you still have Tyler Elsdon, you still have Kobe King. That's the one known quantity here is Kobe King. So you feel like you know what you have in Tony Rojas, but after that, you need to have some depth, and you'd like to see Tamir Robinson take a step and be, the next Mike in line, because even if you like Tyler Elsdon, no one, I think it's fair to say no one sees him as the middle linebacker of the future for the program. He's going to be a piece that they value. He's going to be a good special teams player and a guy that they give snaps to on defense as somebody they trust to be in the game. Maybe not the most important and most critical parts of the game, but somebody that is going to see playing time. But you would like to feel confident that if anything happens, you've got another player that can come in and step in and play and maybe not be great right away, but is taking those progressional steps to being ready to go when it's necessary. And Kavion Keys, I just think it's interesting because he is a guy who could factor in, but Tony Rojas is in front of him. I guess the thing here that you're looking at is even Abdul Carter or even Curtis Jacobs, like they didn't play all the snaps at will. Penn State likes to rotate. So you need to have somebody you feel comfortable rotating into the game. And right now, it's Tony Rojas, and we're going to find out. So that's really where I think that this backup linebacker position, it's depth linebacker of the future at middle linebacker, and then an immediate positional need at will. I think that's really the place where Penn State needs to have one of these guys. Tamir maybe could play will. I think that there's some versatility there. He's very athletic. So that's going to be, I think one of the conversations about who is playing that backup will linebacker position, and how's Tony doing? Like, the top line starter is also from the class of 2023. So nothing is really settled at that linebacker spot.
Although it sounds like all the conversation is the givens are Kobe King and Tony Rojas at linebacker, then the question marks start.
Yep.
All right, next one up, probably an obvious one. Abdul Carter making that move to defensive end.
Yeah.
Got to be curious how that adjustment is, right, T. Frank?
That's basically it. Also, I feel like I would have been run out of town if I didn't have him on this rundown. So really, number 3 was my way of getting interesting players I'm interested, but yeah, how is that transition at linebacker to defensive end going? What's his, I'm not going to be keeping track of his pressure rate or anything like that, but from an eyeball test, is he winning with his hands or is he winning as an athlete? Is he able to do some of the things early on that we're thinking he needs to be able to do? And also, here's an underrated part. I don't know if we'll get new information on this, but, what is his weight? Is he putting on more weight? Is he getting bigger? If you could play at 260, I think that's really impressive. Like, that's going to be an impressive defensive line room. So that those things of checking in on Abdul Carter, understanding how that's going and where the timeline has him on his progression journey, I think is important.
Okay, in the half minute we have left, next on your list, A.J. Harris at cornerback, one of the transfer portal cornerbacks.
Yeah, this is kind of the buzz position where he's new, he's talented, and there's a lot of buzz around him. So part of this is he's a part of the Lion position, and I think we're talking a lot about Jalen Reed, but I think the slot corner, the nickel corner, also is going to be important. So he's a guy who could force his way onto the field pretty early as a redshirt freshman. I think he is transfer from Georgia that James Franklin gave some high praise to, saying he could play 5 positions in the secondary. I want to see that. I want to see a dude who's versatile, athletic, and is physical.
It'll be interesting. He was so highly regarded coming out of high school. Will he put it together quickly? All right, T. Frank, that's it from the defensive side. Next up, we'll look at the offensive side right after this. Hello and welcome back to the Keystone Kickoff Show. It is quarter number 2. He's T. Frank. I'm Jim. We are looking at T. Frank's list of players he's anxious to see in the blue-white game coming up on Saturday. In quarter number 1, we went over the defensive side of the ball. Now it's time to talk about the offense. Let's start your list. And once more, T. Frank, you can't help yourself. You have to cheat at least a little bit. So if you're going to have your list of 5, you got to throw one more guy in with your honorable mention. Let's start there with Ethan Grunkmeyer. I probably would have him even higher on my list. I'm really interested to see him play, T. Frank.
Yeah, and, spoiler alert, there's other players at the same position on this particular list. And the reason we got 6 on each is because I had a hard time paring it down to 6. There's a ton of guys that we're not talking about in this rundown that it's justifiable if we get to the end of it and you're like, you didn't say my guy. Why didn't you say my name? Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I wanted to have on this list of who I'm interested in playing, seeing how they play, seeing where they play, how they're used positionally, especially on offense. And so there's no right answer to have it down to 5. So Ethan Grunkmeyer is a top 10 quarterback in his class, and he is an early enrollee at the position. So, last time we had that, Drew Aller, everyone was super excited to see Drew Aller. The situation is different where Drew is still on the roster. Half of Penn State fandom, it feels like, is plotting some sort of coup to get Bo Pribula to be the starter. So the depth is very different. But at the same time, you mentioned you like Ethan Grunkmeyer. When I first saw his film, I had to talk to some people and say, am I crazy to think he is special? And they said, no, you're not crazy. He's got a top 3 arm in the class, and his athletic ability is really good in terms of scrambling, mobility, throwing on the run is a superpower of his, of accuracy on the move. We talk a lot about Drew Aller, during his recruiting process, how he changed his mechanics from a baseball perspective. And, I talked to his quarterback coach, Brad Mandler, about this on the show at one point, and Ethan didn't have to do any of those corrections. He came out of the box pretty good, and then Brad made him better. So there's a lot of excitement. Like, I have personal excitement of whenever I get to the opportunity to maybe see an elite quarterback. They are rare. Drew was trying to make himself into an elite quarterback. So if you have the opportunity and you have the tools to do that, I want to see what you can do. And Ethan has been on campus now since January, so I want to see what he's able to do, because I also think like there's some clutch playmaking sort of outside the system stuff that he does really well that I want to see how it's translating when he's still learning the system. Like, I don't want to say he's over his head, he's in front of his skis on this, but it's going to be a lot to digest for a freshman. So how is all of that going? That's why I want to see Ethan Grunkmeyer in his opportunities against the Penn State defense.
I think we've got to remember this is a kid who should still be in high school, T. Frank. So judge him on that curve, that he should still be in high school. He may not see a real game for a couple seasons, but even with all that said, it will be interesting to see him on the field. All right, let's get to number 5, which is running back Cam Wallace, who I'm thinking will be the number 3 running back and should get a lot of play in this game.
So you shouldn't expect to see a lot of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And for more on that and the running back position in general, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where there's some information we have about that particular position. Sign up right now, 2 months for $1 with code PSU1, because we love everyone who listens to us on the radio, podcast, or the YouTube channel. You're already a part of the Blue White Illustrated family. We just want to bring you a little bit closer. Cam Wallace I've been impressed with him since I saw him at the beginning of the winter in February. So this is a story that's going to be embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I'm not afraid to embarrass myself for entertainment. We were watching the players walk into intermediate day, and it's the first time we get to see the freshman class from the year before and talk to them. And I looked over, I'm like, what's Zane Durant doing here? But also, that's not Zane Durant. It was Cam Wallace. Physically, he's built not the same, but this is what I mean. Zane Durant is stacked. So he's got turtle shell abs at 285, and he's got great glutes, thick from head to toe, really, really well built. Cam looks the same when you look at him. So that's what I mean in terms of his body type is a smaller version of Zane Durant, and that is a good thing because that's a prototypical athlete build. So that piqued my interest. And then every time I've seen him in camp, watching him run routes, watching him do drills, he looks explosive, he looks strong, he looks like he's got great hands, he runs good routes. So this is a guy that I think the top 2 are the top 2, and there's no getting around that. But there is an opportunity, and we've seen it in Andy Kotelnicki's offense, for a third running back to have some role on offense. And I think he is in position, especially if you're not confident in the third receiver and the fourth receiver, that he could earn more snaps on the football field, especially with the way they use, I don't want to say positionless, but position fluid alignments where he might line up in the slot and then he's lining up in the backfield, motioning into the slot. He has some versatility there. So I want to see exactly how all of that works out.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see him also. And we've seen it over the years. James Franklin is very adamant about the running backs being big enough, physical enough to take on a Big Ten schedule. And so that kind of conversation about Cam Wallace, I'm sure that impresses James Franklin. Next up on your list, Nolan Rucci, another from the transfer portal, native son of Pennsylvania, transfer in from Wisconsin.
Yeah, and those are the factors that put him on the list and not Anthony Donko, which let's be real. Anthony Donko should be on the list. And that's kind of the part of this conversation where it's like, you're not going to win. I'm not winning making this a 5-man list. But 6'8", 315, I guess the idea, but I'm thinking is, as much as Anthony Donko looked great in the bowl game and he is, skyrocketing ahead on the progression schedule, Nolan Rucci's a more veteran player. He's athletically similar, maybe not as physically dominant. Donko has some special strength and movement skills, and Rucci has some similar ones. I'm trying not to equate them 1-to-1, but they're not so far off. I guess what I'm saying is this could be a timeshare. Your right tackle could be a timeshare this year if Rucci has progressed and gotten better and is learning from Phil Troutwine and absorbing all this information and applying it effectively. So this is a first opportunity to see some of that stuff, and also generally see the offense and how these tackles operate in this wide zone system that is not, it's really, from what I've seen, it's pretty aggressive in terms of the blocks they're going to try and get to. So Rucci's super athletic. It's 6'8", 315, bends like he's 6'5", everything I've ever wanted in a prototype tackle, when I'm thinking of like scouting and all those things. So he's super intriguing, and I want to see him play football. I want to see the thing that we didn't see at Wisconsin for 3 straight years.
Very good. Let's go next up. Andrew Rappleyea. This is another guy. He's next in line at that tight end, and I'm interested in seeing him also, T. Frank.
So just like at running back, there's a great opportunity to play 3 tight ends. How many different non-receiver options are there that we've already discussed? We're like, yeah, you could play 3 tight ends with Khalil Dinkins and Andrew Rappleyea and Tyler Warren. But really, one of the reasons he's on this list is because there's sometimes a coincidence and there's sometimes just guys are standing out. And I think there's a little bit of both with Andrew Rappleyea, because I watch the offense during practice. So I mostly focus on the quarterbacks, and then I try to get some solo shots of the receivers running routes and try to get some of that stuff. And for some reason, every time I'm doing receivers, I'm like, oh, who's this big wide? Oh, nope, that's just Andrew Rappleyea. He's 249, 250 pounds. He runs really well. He gives maximum effort, so like he stands out. And I think he stands out, both in good and just because the way he moves. So, everyone's excited about him. I think he's got an opportunity to carve out a role on this offense, especially because if his run blocking has progressed the way we have expected it to, they're going to want that in this offense. So having 2 guys in the versatility of Tyler Warren, Andrew Rappleyea, I'm not counting out Khalil Dinkins because I think he still has a very valuable role as a really dangerous threat down the middle of the field for this offense. But how much of that does Andrew Rappleyea eat into? Because he can also do that.
Well, I just look at that tight end position. It's just like one after another. Here's the way it works. You start out with the role as the 3rd guy, and you just work your way up. That's how it works, and he's next in line. Next name up, really intriguing. Another one of those true freshman early entries, Cooper Cousins.
It's not necessarily the Abdul Carter of the offensive list, but it's close. Like if I didn't have Cooper Cousins on here, I would just be factually wrong. Because the hype for him has built to a degree that I have not seen. Trying to think, maybe Kalen King or Saquon Barkley in terms of generating early buzz. Kalen King would be the latest guy who was like, but it was more like, Kalen King. This started out with, hey guys, Cooper Cousins, like not an afterthought, not like, oh, this is a surprise. This is like, hey, this is genuinely different. And so I want to see what genuinely different looks like on the offensive line. Of course, a football game is the worst place ever to see an offensive line perform, even though it's the only place you'll ever see it. So there's a little bit of, you don't know what you're looking at, but you can kind of get a vibe every once in a while. And this is an area where, I'm going to be excited to go back and look at how he performs once we have the ability to stop, pause, and rewind a bunch on the replay to see the offensive line and how they're progressing overall. Tackles are easier. Rucci, I think you get a good sense, but that center position is really hard in all that chaos on the interior.
But it is interesting with Cooper Cousins. Other times you'll hear people give a name and it's a statement. This is like an exclamation. Cooper Cousins.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
All right. You're allowed to use that. You could take that. All right. Number 1 on the list, Drew Aller. I bet
Yeah.
he was number 1 on the list last year, too.
I bet he was. I don't remember, but I bet he was. And this is just so this is a whole conversation. But there's going to be the execution of the offense that he's judged on, pass fail. Somebody's going to chart every single incompletion. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the holistic sense of how he performs. I want to allow him to make mistakes. It's a scrimmage. And you can't play with confidence, and you can't play with freedom, which is what he's talking about. If you're afraid to make mistakes and you're afraid, I know he says he doesn't listen to the noise outside the building, but if we just equate wanting to be perfect with the criticism outside, you can't be thinking about those things and play free and loose. So make mistakes, throw the football, be aggressive, be confident. It's okay if you miss, but be on time and make some plays. And how do you run the offense overall? I'm looking for a holistic performance that says this is a more confident, more mature Drew Aller.
All right, T. Frank, that's it for quarter 2. Stick around quarter 3, your questions, and we ask T. Frank. Hello and welcome back to the Keystone Kickoff Show. It's quarter number 3. He's T. Frank. I'm Jim. It's time for Ask T. Frank. This is where we're going to take your questions for T. Frank. And as always, he gives us the fantastic answer. If you want to send a question in for T. Frank, all you got to do is download our app, Keystone Sports. You'll see the Ask T. Frank button. All right, let's get started with Jason from Lawrenceville, who says, been reading that Nolan Rucci is getting most of his reps at right tackle behind Donka. With Shelton out, what does that leave at left tackle for the blue-white game?
So that will be J.B. Nelson and Javen Williams. And I would imagine that J.B. is going to be the starter, with some caveats that I don't know how to talk around this particular topic, but if you read my drift, maybe he's not the starter. So Javen Williams, I think, is going to play a lot at left tackle, and I think that that's going to be something that's going to be good for him and good for Penn State to stretch his legs and see what he can do, in that in-game live setting. I thought he looked good last year in mop-up duty early in the season, as far as being an athlete, being able to get out and run, looked good, from an athletic eyeball test when he's past setting. Like, he had gotten to a point where it didn't look foreign to him. It didn't look like he was trying to speak Spanish. So what, again, he should have been on our list of 5 players I'm interested in, all 50 of them on offense. And then but I also think that there's going to be some flexibility where you're going to see, maybe Anthony Donko play left tackle. Maybe you'll see, Nolan Rucci play left tackle. These are the positions. It's kind of like receiver. These are the positions they're starting at. These are the starting points, but then they can do whatever they want. They can put Williams at left. They can put Javen Williams at left guard. They can put Cooper Cousins at right guard. They can put him at tackle. They can put him anywhere that they want because that's how Anthony Donko got to be a tackle in the first place. He played all year last year at left guard, and then during bowl prep or during the end of the season, they said, "Hey, let's just play some tackle reps," and he looked really good doing it. And so they kept doing that. So they've been probably playing around with these lineups, and Rucci has said, I've played a little bit of left tackle in the spring. Primarily, though, he's been playing on the right side. And I think that's, kind of like we had the conversation about Tony Rojas playing Sam, which didn't really materialize. But it's the spring is about maybe trying stuff out. Does Rucci play well at right tackle? We know he's been trained on the left side. So let's get him some balanced out understanding of both positions so that if he has to play left, he can play left. And if he has to play right, he's ready to play right. And I think that there's I'm not trying to tell people this is all a smokescreen, because I think genuinely the ideal situation is Drew Shelton plays left tackle, end of story. And then you got some talented players on the right side, potentially splitting reps. Maybe Donko's the starter and it's not a 50-50, but Rucci's getting some experience his first year here, so they can do whatever they want later. So I guess that's how I view the tackle situation. It's going to be very fluid. The offensive line is always fluid during the blue-white game, so just keep your head on a swivel because they're going to change maybe sometimes from play to play.
Well, a couple of things on this is we have this tendency to overreact. So we read somewhere that Nolan Rucci is getting most of his reps at right tackle and say, oh, he's only playing right tackle, when it might be he's had so much experience at left tackle. Let's give him some experience at right tackle.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you beat me to the punch. I was ready to say my next question comes from Jim and Berwick. How can you not have Javen Williams on your list of guys to watch on offense? But you beat me to that punch, T. Frank. All right, let's go to Jerry in Sarasota, who says, I obviously don't like losing Matt Zollers, but how does Beckham Kritza compare to him? Kritza, of course, is the quarterback who did commit at Penn State.
So I think the difference, kind of like at other positions, is when you're a borderline 5-star, just generally everyone feels much more confident about the translation to the next level. So from a tools perspective and from a performance perspective, some of the what we can understand about the position in terms of the mental aspect and kind of clutch, whatever you want to call those mental factors, you feel better about all of those with a guy who is a top 3 passer in the class. So you just have more questions about Beckham Kritza from that particular perspective. But he's 6'5", and I think, like 165, 170 pounds. So he's got a big frame that he needs to grow into. Wherever he lands on that spectrum is going to determine that particular part of it. But from an arm talent perspective, his release is like viper fast, and he's got a really strong arm. So, there's some natural arm delivery stuff that he does, and there's some wow moments on film. And he's a good scrambler. He's a guy who I think makes too many plays outside of structure, which means he's not processing the information correctly, or he's not playing on time. He's not doing some of those things. But you like the fact that he can and has as a skill at improvising, where he's not just running. I would say he's not just running around waiting for guys to get open. He is extending the play and trying to find open receivers and has an idea of where he's going with the football. I think my problem with that, just generally, like I said, is you got to be operating the offense 90% of the time and then doing that other stuff maybe 10% of the time. So I don't see that particular ratio. So there's a lot of things he has to improve on. But if you hit, like, this is a massive upside kid who has a lot of talent.
Well, also, T. Frank, looking at the things that you talk about, you can't make them taller, but you can make them bigger. Okay, that's something you can do with strength and conditioning. And it sounds like that ability to improvise, I'm not sure how coachable that is, but you can coach the other way, a little bit more discipline. So it does sound like he has a lot of high side to him. All right, let's go to Sammy and Butler, who says, can we learn anything at all in the blue-white game about the coordinators and what we're going to see from them come the 2024 season?
Yes. There's certain things you can't. Like, if you want to have an honest practice to get better, the things you want to be good at, you can't hide certain things. Like, there's going to be a lot of outside running. I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there's going to be a number of option plays. There's going to be specifically on offense, and then the alignments of the players on defense of, the line position. I imagine they're going to practice that. I imagine they're going to practice some third down stuff where they're not going to get into some of their blitz packages, but they are going to get into some of their personnel alignments. But you got to be careful with that. And I've been telling the story all week, is when Manny Diaz first got here, I wanted to know, like, okay, are they playing field boundary at safety where you have a clear delineation between the two positions, or are you going to flip it? Because they had some guys that I thought fit in two different buckets. And also, what are you going to do with Tig Brown? Because the playmaker position typically is the boundary position. You're closer to the box. You're closer to the line of scrimmage. You make more plays in the run game. But he was, of the two, the better field safety. In the blue-white game, he played all field, exclusively field with Keaton Ellis. And then during the regular season, he played literally everywhere. Like, they had a special position for him in the Prowler defense where he was kind of that free man spy. So there are certain things you can't take away, but you can take away some general understandings of, here's what they've been working on here, the general structures, and that's what I would take it. And then, the basic plays, what are they doing? What are they working on in this situation? So those are the things I think and then individual performances by players, but the answer was, about the coordinators. Those are the things I'd be looking at.
And T. Frank, I've always wondered about this. Well, we got to hide everything in the spring game. Well, come that first game to West Virginia, it's all going to be out there. So 11
Yeah.
out of the 12 teams are going to see these things anyway. You've got to show something. Again, I'm sure there are things and not just trick plays, but things that you're going to work off of. Maybe you establish something in the spring game. This is what you'll see from this formation. Then come the regular season, you'll do something off of that. So I don't think you completely hide everything. Okay, Frank in Wayne, New Jersey. With the injury to Smolik, Grunkmeyer moves up to QB3. Should be getting a decent number of reps in the spring game. What do you want to see specifically from him?
I want to see him play on time, and I want to see him play kind of like the conversation with Drew Eller, play with confidence, and let some of your athletic skills shine. And I don't just mean running the football and option stuff, because obviously the quarterback can't get hit in this situation. But, arm strength and arm talent is an athletic skill. So I want to see you show off some of that stuff where try to put the ball in some tight windows. I don't want to say take chances, but, play with confidence. And that's tough when you're still trying to work through. I don't think people respect how much mental run time it takes to play the position that you then don't have for second level things that you can do, but you're still trying to master the basics. So I just want to see some glimpses of that. I want to see some glimpses of the Ethan Grunkmeyer I saw in high school, who was lethally accurate in every situation. And I want to see some of those skills, not just on short routes, but down the field.
What I want to do is remind people, again, this is a high school senior here, okay? It's not even a real freshman. It's a high school senior. T. Frank, I want to see that he's not overwhelmed by it, that he could walk into Beaver Stadium, have a crowd there, and just not be overwhelmed by it. And I think these kids these days, they're much better prepared, these high school players, than they were a generation ago. But that's what I'll be looking for. In case the world goes crazy and he has to play this season, will he walk on the field and not be overwhelmed? That's what I'm looking for. All right, in the last minute we have, let's go to Carl in Middleburg, who says, any thought on the punt and kickoff returners? Read that Caden Saunders is a guy to beat at punt returner. I wasn't too impressed with him last year. That's what Carl says. No thoughts at all, T. Frank? Come on, give me something.
No, I don't. Because I think that everyone wants Daquan Hardy 2.0. And I think the impact of that, the threat of that is great. But most of his performance came against UMass. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Daquan Hardy, but James Franklin reaffirmed they are committed to kick-catch percentage, not losing yards, instead of putting somebody out there to gain yards on punt returns. So it is a defensive-oriented concept of don't lose 30 yards. Well, I don't know who's going to be back there, and there's some things that we've been tracking at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com that I was interested in before, but I don't think we're going to get an idea on. So I don't think that the guys who are going to be a part of that conversation are going to be doing it during the blue-white game. So there will be some, maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of information to be gained from kick return. Hey, it's T. Frank. That's it for today. No quarter four, but don't worry. We've got extra Penn State football content this week. Of course, we've got our live show on Wednesday. That's coming up after Penn State's final open practice of a Tuesday in the spring. Of course, the final open practice is the blue-white game coming up this weekend, but we're live Wednesday, Thursday to recap recruiting, and then we got a special Friday show, 2 p.m. at Nittany Cards Plus in State College. Come see us, join us, and hang out in your blue-white weekend kickoff festivities. We'll be providing you a preview of the game. And then, of course, 45 minutes before kickoff, we've got our tailgate show as well. All of that right here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and podcast.